So I'm going to include a follow-up recording at some point to address questions in relation to the final. But I also wanted to do a demonstration on one of the extra credit opportunities that you all have available for you to use should you choose to use it. And that's the Invisible Man project. So, or the Invisible Man uh, assignment for extra credit. So I've got this nice big photo here of a guy that's sort of jumping to kick a soccer ball, and he's got a pretty busy backdrop. I mean, he's got clouds and then landscape beneath him. I've already downloaded this and I'm going to bring it into a document. As usual, 8.5 by 11, I've rotated it to be the right direction. And I'll go ahead and place my reference image in here. Let's see here. There we go. And I'm going to extend it out just to fully fill up the space. It's okay that the soccer ball is getting chopped off, but if that bugs you, you can move it over a little bit more. Now, this is going to vary which methods you're going to use based on what type of image you're using. But this definitely relates back to the second assignment where you had to edit out flaws, except in this instance, there isn't so much a flaw, you're editing the man out of his clothing. I'm going to duplicate my layer and rasterize it. There we go. So now I can start kind of assessing what areas I'd like to work with. Now, the arm and the head are probably going to be one of the easier places to deal with because they're in the air. So it's going to be pretty easy to select those out and clone around them. I'm just grabbing my lasso, selecting his arm, and I can head on over to fill and do content aware and see how that turns out. Now, you can see for the most part, it did a really good job of removing his arm, but you can see it gets a little weird over where his sleeve is. So this is going to be where I can get a little bit inventive because it can't just be an opening where his sleeve is. What I would like to see everyone do to approach it is actually kind of use some of the clothing to replace the sleeve. So I've made a selection where I think the sleeve could potentially be. Touch it up a little bit. And this is a great opportunity to maybe use the clone stamp to get the right color blue out of his shirt. A little too sharp, I might want to, let's see, deselect. A little too sharp and a little too light. I would imagine that his sleeve would start to become a little bit more shadowy deeper in, like where it would go further deep into his arm. So I might grab the burn tool, maybe switch, yep, it's already set to shadows. Maybe I'll raise the exposure a little bit and just darken what's there. And since the edges are a little crisp, especially compared to the rest of the image, might be a good opportunity for me to use the blur tool along those edges. Just to try and get all the parts to sort of match one another as best as you can. All right, one arm down. Let's do the same thing with his head. Now I'm just grabbing the regular old lasso. You can use whichever your preferred selection method is. And the fill should already be set to content aware. So I should be able to just hit Shift F5 on my Mac, Shift F5. It'll pop up, content aware, yes, hit OK. Now here, it tried to sort of clone in bits and pieces of this sleeve and replace it. So this is another good situation where perhaps Content Aware didn't entirely do it on its own, so I might, let's see, in this instance, maybe I'll narrow down what I'd like to fix. To just the minimum. Try Content Aware Move. Oops, see, it still did some weird stuff. So again, if you're not sure, Clone Stamp is a great option. Just keep in mind that whatever the selection is, chances are you're going to have to go in and touch that up a little bit. No big deal. Just clone over those awkward areas. And again, I'll do a little bit of blurring, just so it matches. Now, because of the direction his head was facing, I can't see into the neck opening of his shirt, so I don't have to worry about doing this sort of thing to where his head was. Now this arm, you can see the interior of the sleeve, so that gives you a little bit less work, but the arm overlaps with a little sky and some trees. So let's see if Content Aware functions here or if I have to pick a different method. Shift F5, okay. All right, now actually that almost fixed his sleeve and everything. That's not too bad. Now you can see there's some awkward areas that might need to be touched up. Right here where there's some floating bits of tree, but for the most part it did a really good job. But you can see that there are some sharp edges along that. So you may want to kind of combine some options here. Maybe do a little cloning to touch up some areas, just to get rid of that awkward area. Maybe get rid of these stripes that kind of popped up. But again, just looking to sort of even out the landscape a little bit better. All right, so we got rid of those harsh edges. They were faint, but enough to, you know, you can see it right here a little bit. So I'm just cleaning up some of that. There we go. Same thing with the bits of sky that popped in, or the bits of trees that popped into the sky. Clean that up. You can notice I made my cursor a lot smaller. And I'll do the same thing right in here where his sleeve is. Try to just match it as best that I can. Might need to switch to spot healing just to smooth some of it out. And again, the burn, I want to try and just get that sleeve to match as best as I can. So might be a little bit of light area, but probably not a heck of a lot. So just trying to smooth that out a bit. Okay. Not too bad. His belly's showing. Not too sure what Content Aware will think of this area, so I'm going to make a selection and see what happens. And if it doesn't work, I'll pick a different method. Shift F5. It extended the shirt a little bit. However, it threw some sky in there, which is a little strange. So I'll hit undo. That's going to all be the interior of his shirt. It's going to be this dark color. So I could probably just grab that, and helps if I do a little at a time. And clone down what I'd like to use and try not to grab his pants or any other shirt parts from it. And I'm going to get a little bit of a repeating pattern in here, but I'll touch that up momentarily. So just trying to get the shirt color in place. So you can see now that I've zoomed in, you can see that there's this sort of striping that's occurring. So I'm going to use my spot healing to just try to paint over some of those repetitive regions. And there's no right or correct way to do this. Really, when it comes to healing or correcting images, it's very much going to depend upon what tools you prefer, what tools you're comfortable using. And we'll make it dark and then maybe light out around the edges. Where's dodge? Lighten the edges just a bit. And same thing, I want to get the edge consistency as close as possible to what's going on in the original so that it doesn't stand out too much. Looks like I've still got a little bit of flesh showing there. Switch on back to the clone stamp. In such a tight area like that, I don't need a selection as long as I'm careful about the regions that I'm cloning from and painting in. There we go. So there's the back of his shirt. So now we got legs. Do a quick before and after. So now I've got to worry about those legs. Now because they're touching one another, it's probably going to be easiest to select them as one unit rather than deal with one leg separate from the other. However, we're going to have to recreate a pant leg for that far area. So first, I'm going to go ahead and get my selection taken care of. And since this is got a little more contrast, especially with those dark socks, I'm going to grab my magnetic lasso tool for this. And just make a quick selection. I'm going to come down the other leg. There we go. So as I mentioned, if I try content aware, let's see what it tries to do. All right, it did a little good work for us, but it did a couple things that probably we weren't expecting. One of those is it's bringing in trees up in his sock. Another is that it's trying to take the pants that are visible and bring them in. So this is a good start. It did pay attention to the sky around it, but I still think that we could probably use a little clone stamp to get rid of some of that other stuff. So we'll touch that up. Up here it's a little lighter. that up right in this area. You can see that it goes from dark blue to pale. So I'm going to actually clone from this area and try to carry some of that cloud texture through just to even it out. And if I go up too much, I might accidentally grab shoe, so I want to be real careful. Grab some over here. Oops, see? Here I'm grabbing his sleeve right there, so helps to be very cautious. Now, if I clone too close to the edge, you see how I'm getting a sharp line? Part of that is just because the clone stamp is seeing that the edge of the document's there. I don't want that to happen, so I'm just trying to smooth it out as much as I can. Deselect. Now you can see that because my selection was a little tight, it's still grabbing bits of the image around the edges, so I'll want to touch that up a little bit. Carefully, of course. Spot healing might be a better option here. With a soft edged brush. There we go. Nice. Okay, so looks like I've still got a little bit of a line. Try to clear that up. All right, so we've gotten rid of his legs. Some areas are still a little bit shadowy, so I'll probably continuously go in and just touch that up a touch. Just want to make sure that the pants don't look like they're bleeding into one another. So now I need to deal with the interior of the pants. Now, of course, you don't know what it looked like, so you're gonna have to get a little creative, but I do have a rough idea of where that was, so I can kind of guesstimate what I've got going on here. So I'll go ahead and just editing my selection. So I'll go ahead and see if I can clone some of what's here and have that function in the interior. So I'm gonna start down on the rear side and just try to continue that over and bring in some wrinkles if I can make it happen. But remember, because it's the interior, it's probably going to have a little bit of darkness set to it. So don't be afraid of the burn and dodge. Now, obviously, it's very easy to go really dark. A little goes a long way. Don't overdo it. But it's almost a necessary evil that we have to work with. So little bits at a time, deselect, assess how it looks, and then do more work if you need to. I'll go ahead and leave it at this for right now. And again, I'll soften those edges. Let me undo real quick. You see how right here, and I'll zoom in, see how there's a tiny bit of sky showing through? Don't worry about that. If you blur it, you're never going to see it. If there's more than that, then of course, use your best judgment, clone that out or something, but a little bit is probably going to disappear without a lot of extra work. Okay, so we've got the front leg or the front portion of the pants dealt with. This portion of the pants where the second leg was, though, still needs at least a little bit. This is a great opportunity for you to take what you've already got and then copy and paste it. So I'm going to grab a chunk of this, Command or Control C, Command or Control V. Now I've got an extra pant leg just floating. I should be able to relocate it, maybe rotate it a touch. It'll probably scale down a little bit just because it's a little bit further away from the viewer. Then I'll make another selection. Doesn't need to be as tight. And erase what I don't need. Now, let me deselect that real quick. For placement, because we've still got a part of the old leg there, what I'm doing here is I'm making it transparent to make sure that it's placed in the right location. Now I can see I've got a little bit of extra overlap there. So what I might do on this extra pant leg is I'll grab some of my transform tools and just adjust it so it's not identical to the other pant leg, but enough to where you can see that some changes have been made. All right, hit return. Looking at where the edge of the opening was, maybe make a tiny, a little adjustment. There we go. Just trying to line up those edges. That's why I'm not turning it too far down, but it's up enough to where you can see. I'll hit return. I'll hide it. Make a selection of where the front leg is. Turn it back on. Oops. Erase. So I can actually just hit delete in this instance. Deselect. And then if I need to, I can, move it a little bit to better fit. Maybe hide some of those bits of the backdrop. And then if I want to show a little bit of what's beneath, just to get it to blend in a little bit, like right here, you can see that there's a little bit of the original pant leg showing. I could subtly erase little bits and pieces just so the original shows through. And then, of course, I'll blur it some more. Oh, and we still have the interior of his socks. That shouldn't be too difficult, though. I'll blur those edges where I had to cut things away. And since black is pretty dark, I probably won't need to do much more than just clone that in. If you want to lighten it up a little bit, maybe, oh, even that's not going to work. I think that'll be fine. I would just blur those edges. Now, if they were lighter socks, you'd probably be able to see kind of the seam or like an edge of some kind that you would want to be able to deal with. Touch those up just so they blend in. The blur tool. There we go. Real quick and easy. How you go from having a man to having no man. So that's essentially all that I'm expecting. It shouldn't take you very long, provided you remember the tools. I try to keep it simple, like an easy 10 points. Should be the easiest 10 points if you remember those tools. And again, every image is going to be tricky for one reason or another. It doesn't have to be a crazy active photograph. Like if you find, I just did an image search for like sports, but if you were to do a picture that was like super busy, you want to take into consideration, editing her out, it might be difficult to figure out what's behind her. If you edited this person out, you'd have to make the other half of this man's face. So it doesn't have to be a super, super, super busy image. It can be a picture of just one person or maybe a few people interacting. But, it would be easier to edit this man out because he's got a relatively flat backdrop. Same thing here, this couple, you'd be able to sort of figure out what would be going on behind them versus someone that has a very deep image where there's a lot of stuff happening behind them. As always, make sure that you're using a large enough image. When you do a search, click large. It'll make sure that only the biggest, prettiest, clearest images are going to be what pop up. And it can be of pretty much whatever type of person you like. All I ask is that you have more than just a face showing. Editing out a little bit of a leg and a little bit of some fingers and this face would be way too easy. This isn't enough work to suit this particular extra credit opportunity. You want to make sure that you have someone that has a little bit more skin exposed. It doesn't have to be someone in a bathing suit or anything like that, but you do want to make sure that there's enough to show me that you are doing some work in order to get that done. So if you are wanting to do the extra credit and perhaps you're not sure if it quite meets the assignment's requirements, feel free to send me the photo and I can give you a thumbs up or a thumbs down on whether or not I think you should go for something a little more challenging or if it is suitable for the needs of the assignment, for the extra credit. I will be doing an in-depth demo today for my in-person class, and I'll be posting the Adobe Connect video online for you to reference also. That will be sort of like what we did in last week's lecture, but a little bit more in depth. So that will be coming later this evening also. Thank you, and looking forward again to seeing what everybody's working on. Please check in with me, and I will discuss anything else that comes up as something I need to work on shortly.